The following is a video tutorial for how to create the cow catcher part for the model miniature train. So first, I'd just like to take a quick look here at the documentation that has been provided to us by Project Lead the Way. And we can see that we have a few different views here. This one is an ISO view, and then another ISO view just from the back side, and then another ISO view from the other side of this. And then a cutaway view just so we can see the location of this little pin marker here. So 0.125 from the bottom, 0.275 in from this corner outside here. So basically we're going to be looking at all of these numbers in each of these views and combining them in order to create this part. We could also take a look at some of the documentation that I have provided for you. You see I've tried to put down some of those views as well that you had seen here, like the ISO views. I also did a cross-section view so that you could see the thickness of some of the detail components in this area here. And so why don't we just go ahead and get started. I'm going to predominantly use this documentation here though to make the part, because it basically has everything that I'm going to need. At this point I'm going to switch over to Inventor. As you can see, I already have this part created for you. And so I'm just going to run through the list here of all these different things that we've gone through to make this part. And then of course I'll start over from scratch and take you through it one step at a time. So basically what we had started out with here to create some of this 3D solid model, we had lofted essentially two sketches together to create a part. So what a loft does, and if I hover over the tooltip here, you'll see that we can take one sketch, one two-dimensional profile, and select another two-dimensional profile, and then effectively connect those two areas, creating a loft in between them. So this is something new that we have not used yet. Before we've just used extrude and revolve. So this will be one of the new tools that you'll be using. And so we go from sketch 1 to sketch 2 to create that area there. Next, I shelled out the bottom half of this part here, removing the bottom face actually. And so this will also be a new tool that we have not used yet, the shell command. And then to finish this off here, I had created two sketches on both of these front ends and extrude cut those areas out. And then lastly, on the back of this part, we had these three pins here, which I created one sketch to locate them correctly, and then extruded those outwards, and then finished them with a little chamfer at the edge of each of those. And we had to do each of those chamfers individually because that's just the way that it works. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in here and say we're going to create a new part, making sure that I'm on the English tab here and the standard inch IPT. I will then say create, and I'm going to come up here and say create 2D sketch. And for this part I'm actually going to select this XZ plane right here. So this XZ plane is what I'm looking for. I'm going to go ahead and select that plane, and here we are in our sketch mode. So what I'm going to do here is sketch out the bottom profile of this part, sketch out that bottom outline profile, and then we'll create another sketch up above there for this smaller profile, and then we'll loft those two areas together. So some of the important numbers that I see here that I'm going to need to take note of to create that first profile are going to be this 1.8 from here to here, and that'll be actually the first line that I'm going to lay down. So I'm going to take my line tool here, selecting from the center point of my part file, drag out to the right and say 1.8, enter. Next, I can see here that I have a thickness of 0.25 along this side edge here, so that'll actually be on both sides. So I'll grab my line tool once again, picking from the end points here and going straight up at 0.25, and then on this side at 0.25. Okay, and now I need to look at the overall height for this part, which is actually going to be 1 inch. And I can see that it's going to meet smack dab in the middle here. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to grab my line tool, and I'm going to come back down to this bottom line that we had placed. I'm going to drag my cursor across until I see the green little locator mark pop up. That's telling me that that is the midpoint of that line. So I'm going to select that midpoint and going straight up. I'm going to type in 1, and now I have the overall height of this profile, and from here I can just connect back down to our little 0.25s on each side. Alright, once that's said, once that's put together there, I can actually then just right click and delete this 1 inch line in the middle. I could leave it, but I prefer not to have it there if I don't need it, and that'll be all for this sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and then say finish sketch. Alrighty, and so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to the XZ plane, and if I right click on that, I can select this option here for visibility, and that will allow me to see that plane now. And this is going to be helpful because what we need to do is basically create a sketch above this area here, but to do so I need a plane to select and create a sketch on. So I'm going to create a new plane. We have many different options for placing a plane here in Inventor. The one that we are going to use here today is offset from a plane. So basically I can just say I want you to be a certain distance from whatever original one I want to select from. But take note that there are quite a few different options here for creating new planes and effectively creating unique parts in that manner. So I'm going to go ahead and select offset from plane, and then I'm going to select this XZ plane, and then I'm going to tell it to be, and if I jump back over to my documentation here, I can see that the overall depth of this part is going to be 0.75. We see that right here, the depth of the part. So from this bottom profile to this top profile is going to be 0.75. So in Inventor here, I'm going to tell it to be 0.75 away from the original plane, and there you have it. You can see it's right above that area. So now that I have this new plane I can sketch on, I'm going to say create a 2-day sketch and select that plane. It'll jump me over into the sketch mode here. And then another new thing that I want to show you is this project geometry tool. What this does is, say if you have any kind of line or curve or geometry that is beneath a plane that you are currently working on, you can actually project it and bring it up to the front, and that can be helpful for many different reasons, but for this particular scenario we're going to use this to just create a offset of the original profile that we see here. So what I'm going to do is say project geometry, and I'm going to go around and click on each one of these lines. Notice they are changing in color now to all yellow. Okay, and now that I have that geometry projected, it'll make it that much easier for me to lay down my smaller sketch here, which should be smack dab in the middle of that larger one. I can see some of the numbers here that are going to be important are going to be this 1.2 along the bottom, and then also it's got a 0.25 along the sides, same as the original one, and then the overall height of that front sketch I see down here is going to be 0.75. So I got 1.2, 0.25, and 0.75 to worry about. So I'm going to go ahead, and the reason we did project geometry is because I can come in here now with my line tool, and I should be able to find the midpoint of this bottom line and take that straight up to 0.75. And then back down here on the bottom, I know that it was 1.2 all the way across, so I could go out 0.6 in each direction and up 0.25, and then of course connect it to the peak here. I'll do the same thing for the other side, 0.6, 0.25 and connect it to the peak. I do not need this line anymore, so I'll right click and delete it, and then I'll say finish sketch. So now you can see I have 2 profiles, and this is where we're going to create that loft in between this area. So that does bring me to the next portion here, which is going to be to create that loft. I'm going to go ahead and select loft here to bring up this dialog box, and there's a couple different options for placing a loft. We're going to want to do this first option here, and the way that this works is we're going to go ahead and select sketch 1. You see it got added to the list here for sections, and I'm going to then select sketch 2. Alright, but because sketch 2 actually had 2 different profiles in it, as you can see being highlighted here, we have to tell it to do the inside profile. That's what we want. So I'm going to click there, and now all we have left to do is say click to add for a rail, and it will fill in that area for us. So we'll then say OK, and here we have my shape. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to shell out the bottom and the inside of the part here. Jump back over to my documentation. I can see that the thickness needs to be 0.1 of an inch. So I will then use my shell command here. The thickness is 0.1. That's what I want it to be. I'm going to select this bottom face here to remove out that face and say OK. Now I have shelled out the interior of that part. The last 2 things I need to do here are going to be putting those indentations on the front of both of these sides, and those 3 little pegs on the back with the chamfers. So doing the front parts here, the little indents, actually not too bad. We're just going to go ahead and say create a sketch, and you can do either one of these sides first. I'm going to pick the right side here. Notice that these lines here are yellow. It actually projected the geometry for us for that profile that we see here. So what I'm going to do here is another new tool. It's called offset. So if you select offset and come in here and select that perimeter profile, click 1 time and then drag inwards, and I could place this at any point really, because then I'm just going to go back and dimension it to be a certain distance. Going back, checking my documentation here, that distance needs to be a 0.1 as well. So I'm going to use my dimension tool, select the top line to the top line here, place that dimension and say be 0.1. I can now say finish sketch. I will then extrude and then extrude cut this inside profile here, and it needs to be at a distance of 0.05 is going to be the thickness for that indent there. Jump back over to Inventor, I'll say 0.05 and then OK. So that looks good there, and we're going to do the exact same thing to the other side. So create a sketch. I will offset and bring that profile in. Use dimension, selecting both of these lines here and telling it needs to be 0.1 of an inch away. We can finish that sketch. Extrude cut this profile out at 0.05 and say OK. I accidentally did not say cut, so we'll make sure I say cut on that profile and send it inwards. There we go. And the last thing, putting our little pegs on the back and then chamfering them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a sketch on this back surface here. Should square us up pretty nicely. And I could do this one of 2 ways. I could use some lines and lay out some lines to tell me distances between edges and where those circles need to be. But I'm actually going to do it a little bit more of an efficient way, and that's going to be by dimensioning them into place. Going back to our documentation, I have some good numbers in this view down here that are telling me that This peg is going to be 0.625 off the bottom edge here, and it'll be 0.625 from the center of this peg here. So I'm actually going to have to place this bottom peg first in order to dimension this guy into the correct location. So let's take a look at the bottom pegs. I can see that it's going to be 0.125 off the bottom edge and 0.275 off the corner here to the very center. So what I'm going to do, and then also I guess I could take note of that diameter, which I see here in this view is going to be a 0.125. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a circle. I'm going to tell it to be 0.125. Then I'm going to grab my dimension tool and select the center of that circle, and then select the bottom edge here. Place that dimension and tell it to be 1.25. I will then select the center again from that circle, and then the end point here, drop that dimension down and tell it to be 2.75. I will then repeat that process again for the other side. So putting down a circle at 0.125, dimension that into place here off the bottom at 0.125, and from the center to the edge here at 0.275. Okay, so I have both of those placed correctly. Last but not least, I'm going to need my third peg to be placed there. I remember it needs to be 0.625 from the bottom and 0.625 from the center of either of these two pegs. So again, circle, 0.125, dimension from the center to the bottom here at 0.625, and then of course from the center to the center here at 0.625. Okay, now these circles have been placed correctly. I'm going to say finish sketch, and I will then extrude those three circles to create our pegs here. They need to be extruded at a distance of 0.125 as well. We see that number occurring quite a bit here on this part. So we'll say 0.125 and OK. And one of the last things here will be to just add these chamfers to the ends of these pegs here. It says in our documentation that it's going to be a 0.01 inches going inwards and at a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to select my chamfer tool. I'm going to select the second option for distance and an angle, since that is the information that has been provided to me. The distance here is 0.01. I'm sorry, 0.01. That's what I thought. And the angle is going to be 45. So what I'm going to do next is select the face and then the edge and say apply. I'm going to select the face and the edge and say apply. So if you say apply, it'll let you continue on with that as opposed to having to bring up the window again. If you hit OK, you know it exits out the window. So the last one here, face, edge, and for this I can say OK because I don't need to place anymore. And here we have it with our part. Now just some housekeeping issues here. To clean up these work planes, I can right click on them and uncheck the visibility there so that I don't have to see those anymore. And then I need to set my material to ABS plastic, and then I will take a look at my properties window and see if these numbers match what they should be. So I have a mass of 0.01, an area of 7.002, and a volume of 0.266. I'm going to take a look at the iProperties that I have provided for you. And those are the numbers that we're looking for there. So 0.01, 7.002, and 0.266. Alright, so we hit it right on the head here. That is how you create the cow catcher part for the model miniature train. Best of luck and hope to see you next time.